Hey guys, welcome back. I have another video here. This is from Vintage Britain. I know we've done their videos before, and I will give you fair warning, this might be AI. I'm not sure yet, but it's 10 British traditions that are slowly fading away. I don't know yet if it's AI just because I don't like to go in and look at something before I do a video for it. I just feel like I'd rather go into it blind like a lot of you guys. Oh, but yeah, let's go ahead and get it started and see what it's about. I will link this video in the description, and I will also put a link to my Patreon. You can also join the channel now here on YouTube as a member, and you'll get access to videos before they go public. And usually I try to be a couple days ahead, so you should get some access to them before anybody else. Or I'm sorry, a couple days before. I was looking at something and I just talked. Uh, so you'll get access to usually quite a few videos. On the weekend, I don't do a whole lot. So then throughout the week it builds back up. And then also I will see your comments a lot more than if you're not a member. Not that you need to be. Happy to have you here. Uh, anyway, let's get this going.
Britain is a country built on tradition, from the way we eat and dress to how we spend our Sundays and holidays. For generations, these customs shaped everyday life, creating rhythms and rituals that gave people a sense of order and belonging. Some were small gestures, others were great communal events, but all of them carried a distinctly British character. Today, many of these traditions are fading. The habits that once seemed permanent have slipped quietly into history, replaced by new routines and faster ways of living. In this video, we're looking back at some of the great British traditions that defined the past, but are slowly disappearing from the present. Number 1. Tipping the hat. Not so long ago, a simple gesture spoke volumes about respect and manners in Britain. The tipping of a hat. For generations of men, a hat was an everyday part of their outfit, whether it was a flat cap in the north, a trilby in the city, or even the famous bowler hat in London. And with it came the custom of lifting or tipping the brim when greeting someone. It was a small act, but it carried great meaning. A gentleman might tip his hat to a lady as a mark of respect, or to an acquaintance as a polite hello. In villages and towns, it was a way of acknowledging neighbours without words. Children saw their fathers do it and learned the habit themselves, making it part of everyday life. The tradition.
I don't think that's an exclusively British tradition. I know that it's not something that's done really hardly here anymore, but you definitely see it in movies. And I would say it's probably something my great great grandfather I think did that. Um my great great grandfather, he grew up in New York City, and even I mean as far back as I can remember him when I was a kid, he was always dressed immaculately. He wore a suit, he wore his tie, he would wear the hat. Um, we always kind of joked that always looked like a mafia boss. But he was, he was shorter, uh, smaller guy, but he just always had his hair done. He was dressed immaculately. Um, and I can just remember him doing stuff like that. It's just unfortunately something that's kind of fallen by the wayside anymore. And it's just too, a lot of people don't wear hats like that, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. I think that there's still do things with the kind of the tipping of the hat or taking the hat off. Like here, even if you go to like a sporting event, they always do the Star Spangled Banner, I think it is, or the Pledge of, I don't know. They do one of them before the ball games. It's usually, I'm not even out there at my seat yet. We're usually trying to grab hot dogs or popcorn or whatever. But the men, even the women that are out there wearing hats during that, they'll take it off and they kind of put it over their heart. So different versions, different things.
Reflected a world where manners were highly valued and subtle gestures carried weight. Tipping the hat was as natural as saying good morning, a sign of courtesy that required no effort but said a great deal. Today, hats themselves are far less common in daily life, and with their decline, the gesture has almost vanished. Few men wear them outside of special occasions, and the old custom of tipping the brim has slipped quietly into history. Number 2. Church on Sundays. For generations, Sunday mornings in Britain began with a walk to church. It was the weekly ritual that shaped family life, filled the streets with familiar faces, and set the tone for the day ahead. Families dressed in their Sunday best and walked together to the local church. Afterwards, the church steps became a meeting place where neighbours caught up and plans for the week ahead were discussed. For many, church anchored the community, offering not only spiritual guidance but also a sense of stability. Churches were also central to key milestones in life. Christenings, weddings, and funerals all passed through their doors, weaving the institution into the very fabric of family history. Today, attendance has fallen sharply. Many churches struggle to fill their pews, and younger generations often see Sunday mornings as a time for leisure rather than worship. Some church buildings have been converted into homes, cafes, or community centres. Yet in some villages and towns, the tradition continues, albeit with smaller congregations. Services remain important to those who keep the faith, and for them, the quiet routine of Sunday worship still holds deep meaning. Number 3.
Unfortunately, here, especially where I am, which is kind of like the South, eh, I say unfortunately because it seems like the loudest Christians are the most hateful ones. Um, I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school my entire life, up until I graduated high school anyway. And my family was Catholic. My great grandfather that I was just talking about, he had actually been Jewish and he switched over to Catholicism when he met my grandmother, who was Irish. Um, I think that religion can be very good. I think that belief can has been scientifically proven. You know, if somebody's ill and they believe and they pray and they believe that they're going to get better, they will. Not everything, but some. Um, but on the other side of the coin, it's also used to justify hate. Um, I am not a religious person. But I think that I have a very good understanding of what is right and what is wrong. And I don't necessarily think that you should have to believe that you're going to hell or heaven to just do what is right to be a good person. Um, but here, the Christians, not all of them, but many of them really just have no tolerance. It's like they talk about studying the Bible and Jesus and God, and it's like they miss the most basic principles of the Bible that are said over and over and over again of how you should treat your neighbor, of how you should not throw the first stone um of judgment, and yet all day long it seems like they are judging people, putting people down, telling people they're wrong for their beliefs or non-beliefs, and just there's just a lot of hate in their heart. And it grinds you down, man. um and they just refuse to see it. There's actually a he's a politician, but he's also a pastor in Texas. His name's James Tallarico, and I would encourage you guys to actually look at some of his stuff because, like I said, I'm not a religious person at all, but he is kind of spot on with a lot of his stuff, and he calls it out. He grew up his well, I won't get into it, but he grew up with a single mom, and his dad was abusive, and so he, knew struggle growing up. He watched what happened to his mom, and he talks about his own church and how there's less and less young people because of, I mean, the way that Christians have treated people and their judgment. And he really, really is. He's just the way that he says things. It's so refreshing that you just so rarely hear anymore. See like the Christians that are actually walking the walk and talking the talk and have compassion, like real compassion for other people when they're not trying to convert them or get something from them. Um, but anyway, I could go on about that all day, and I apologize, guys.
Working men's clubs. Working men's clubs were once at the heart of countless towns and industrial communities across Britain. Founded in the 19th century to provide affordable leisure and companionship for working class men, they quickly grew into much more than drinking venues. They became places where families gathered, where entertainment thrived, and where a strong sense of belonging was built. Inside the club, the atmosphere was friendly and familiar. Members paid a small subscription and in return had access to cheap drinks, snooker tables, darts boards, and regular entertainment. There were concert rooms with cabaret singers, comedians, and local performers. Bingo nights filled halls with excitement, while charity raffles and fundraising events supported the wider community. In many areas, the club was the social centre, offering a safe, affordable place to meet after long shifts in factories, mines, or workshops. They also held a cultural significance. Many clubs supported local sports teams, brass bands, or community projects. They were democratic institutions, run by elected committees and funded by their members. For many working families, the club was where friendships were forged, marriages celebrated, and milestones of life marked. Today, working men's clubs still exist, but they are far fewer and their role has diminished. The decline of heavy industry, changing drinking habits, and competition from pubs and other entertainment venues gradually eroded their membership. Some clubs have closed entirely, while others survive only with a much older crowd. A handful have modernized to attract new members, hosting tribute acts or community events, but the heyday of the working men's club has passed. Number 4. Queuing with patience. Few things summed up the British character more than the queue. Whether at the post office, the bus stop, or outside a shop during rationing, queuing was more than just waiting. It was a quiet ritual of fairness and order. Everyone knew their place, and cutting in was unthinkable. In fact, patience in the queue became a point of pride, a symbol of British politeness. Queues were everywhere in daily life.
I think that, well, I know we've watched another video where they were talking about British people and queuing, and now I'm thinking that it was probably from vintage Britain as well. Um, it's such an odd thing to bring up. I think everywhere does, well, not everywhere, but most places do that.
Children lined up neatly in school canteens, shoppers stood patiently for bread, and cinema goers formed long lines that curled around the block for the latest film. During the war years, queuing became even more ingrained. Rationing meant that food supplies were limited, and people accepted that waiting their turn was simply part of life. To many, it represented solidarity, the belief that everyone should have a fair share. The queue also had its own quiet culture. People struck up conversations with strangers, shared local gossip, or simply stood in silence, respecting the unspoken rules. Today, queuing still exists, but the patience that once defined it seems less certain. Technology has changed how we wait. Online shopping, self-checkouts, and fast-track services mean many people avoid queues altogether. And when queues do form, they're often shorter, faster, or more impatient. The old discipline, where people waited without complaint and took pride in doing so, is less visible. Number 5. Polishing shoes daily. In the Britain of the past, polished shoes were a sign of discipline, pride, and respectability. For men heading to work, children in school uniforms, or families off to church, shining your shoes was simply part of getting ready. Most homes kept a shoebox tucked away, filled with brushes, cloths, and tins of polish in familiar brands like Kiwi or Cherry Blossom. The routine was straightforward but satisfying. A dab of polish, a firm rub with the brush, and finally a buff with a soft cloth until the leather gleamed. The smell of polish was distinctive, filling kitchens and hallways as the whole family took part. For workers, polished shoes showed they cared about their appearance and took pride in their role. For children, learning to shine shoes was a lesson in responsibility, often taught by parents who insisted it was as important as neat hair or tidy clothes. Today, daily shoe polishing has almost vanished. Trainers and casual shoes dominate, and leather shoes are often worn without much care. Office dress codes are more relaxed, and the idea of setting aside time each evening to shine shoes feels like something from another age. Number 6. Seaside holidays at British resorts.
I was just gonna comment on that. There are actually channels on YouTube where that's all they do is it's just shining shoes and it's like ASMR and um I've I like to watch videos when I'm going to sleep. Um and I do a lot of like camping videos that I watch a lot of the times, but I do go in spells of where I'll just watch these guys do buffing out shoes and shining them. And it's satisfying for some reason.
For much of the 20th century, the highlight of the year for countless British families was the seaside holiday. Blackpool, Margate, Brighton, and countless smaller resorts bustled each summer with families escaping the smoke of towns and cities. With suitcases packed and excitement high, people boarded trains, charabancs, or later, family cars heading for the coast. Arriving at the seaside meant more than just sand and sea. There were donkey rides along the beach, striped deck chairs facing the waves, and children with buckets and spades digging endless castles. Pier stretched proudly into the water, lined with arcades, fortune tellers, and stalls selling sticks of rock. Fish and chips wrapped in paper
What are
became part
these?
of the ritual.
What are those? Why are they in the water? Can you guys comment and let me know?
Selling sticks of rock. Fish and chips wrapped in paper became part of the ritual, eaten hot and steaming with the sound of gulls overhead. Resorts offered entertainment that became legendary. Blackpool boasted the Tower Ballroom, variety shows and its famous illuminations. In smaller towns, holiday camps provided chalets, bingo halls, and evening dances, creating memories that lasted a lifetime. For many working families, it was the only holiday they could afford, but it was enough. The sea air, the laughter, and the simple pleasures of the coast were treasures in themselves. Today, Britain's seaside towns tell a different story. Some still attract visitors, but cheap flights abroad have drawn many holiday makers away. Once thriving resorts now struggle with decline, and the golden age of donkey rides and deck chairs has faded. Number 7. Sunday roast at home. For generations, the Sunday roast was more than just a meal. It was a ritual that anchored the week. Families would gather around the table for a spread of roasted meat, crisp potatoes, seasonal vegetables, Yorkshire puddings, and rich gravy. It was comforting, predictable, and deeply British, a tradition shared across regions and classes alike. The origins of the Sunday roast go back centuries, tied to both religion and practicality. In many homes, Sunday morning began with church, and the roast was prepared to be ready by the time the family returned. It was also about togetherness. The Sunday table often brought extended family under one roof. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins might all squeeze around to share a plate. For children, it wasn't only about the food, but about listening to adult conversations, absorbing family stories, and learning manners. Carving the joint was almost ceremonial, usually reserved for the head of the household, while everyone else waited patiently for their share. Today, the Sunday roast hasn't vanished, but it has changed. Fewer people have the time or energy to cook one from scratch, and many families no longer gather in the same way. Pubs and carveries have stepped in, serving roasts that still draw crowds who want the taste of tradition without the hours of preparation. For some, it remains a family ritual, but for many others it is now an occasional treat rather than a weekly certainty. What was once the centerpiece of British family life is still remembered with affection, even if it no longer defines the rhythm of the week. Number 8. Proper letter writing. Before emails, text messages, and instant communication, writing letters was an everyday part of British life. A letter was more than a way to pass on information. It was a thoughtful act, shaped by care, patience, and attention to detail. People kept writing paper and fountain pens at home, often stored neatly in a bureau or writing desk. Popular brands like Basildon Bond provided smooth paper and matching blue envelopes, instantly recognizable to anyone who received them. The process itself carried a kind of ritual, sitting down, thinking carefully about what to say, and putting pen to paper with your best handwriting. Letters connected people across distances, family members serving abroad, children away at school, or friends who had moved to another town relied on them to keep in touch. Today, proper letter writing has all but disappeared. Quick messages and phone calls have replaced the need, and handwritten letters are now reserved for rare occasions like Christmas, birthdays, or condolences. While post still arrives daily, it is more likely to be bills or adverts than words from a loved one. For older generations, though, the memory of writing and receiving letters is vivid. It was a slower, more thoughtful form of communication, one that required time but rewarded it with warmth and meaning. In its absence, many feel something has been lost, a tradition that spoke of care, patience, and the quiet pleasure of keeping in touch. Number 9. Pubs as the centre of community life. For centuries, the British pub was far more than a place to drink. It was the beating heart of local life, a gathering spot where news was shared, friendships forged, and traditions passed down. Every village and neighbourhood had its local, and each pub carried its own character, from the landlord behind the bar to the regulars who filled the same seats night after night. The pub was where sports were debated, where workmates relaxed after long shifts, and where whole communities celebrated weddings, christenings, and football victories. Today, many pubs still thrive, but their role has changed. Rising costs, new habits, and the decline of heavy industry have closed thousands of locals. The ones that remain often rely on food service, themed nights, or tourism to survive. For many, the traditional pub culture, where neighbours gathered simply to talk and unwind, has become less common. Number 10. Wakes Week. For much of the 19th and 20th centuries, entire towns in industrial Britain would shut down for what became known as Wakes Weeks. In places like Lancashire, Yorkshire, and the Midlands, factories, mills, and workshops all closed at the same time, giving whole communities a week's holiday together. It was a tradition rooted in older religious festivals but transformed by the needs of working families during the Industrial Revolution. The timing varied by town, but the pattern was the same. Once the looms or furnaces fell silent, workers and their families packed up for the seaside. Blackpool, Morecambe and Scarborough filled with holidaymakers arriving by train, the stations bursting with excited crowds and their luggage. Wakes Weeks weren't just about rest, they were about renewal. For people who worked long hours in demanding jobs, it was often the only time of year they saw the sea, breathed fresh air, and enjoyed leisure with their families. Children played on beaches, parents strolled along promenades, and communities that toiled side by side all year long found joy in relaxing together. Today, the tradition of Wakes Weeks has faded. Paid annual leave is now spread across the year, and families no longer holiday at the same time. The rise of foreign travel and the decline of heavy industry have reshaped how people take their breaks. Some towns still nod to the old practice with local holidays, but the grand shutdowns of whole communities are long gone.
What's good?
Anne Boleyn arrived at Henry's court, fired up.
This girl that just started talking, she's got I know they're older shows. They're not I don't think they're still making them, or at least they're not showing the new ones here. Um I've watched a lot of British history with her. Lucy Worsley. Yeah, I like her a lot. Anyway, this maybe we'll do this one. Actually, I think I am gonna do this one here soon. But that was a really good video. No, you guys get upset about the AI and the pictures, and sometimes they're not all British or something you recognize. It's okay, guys. It's I know what it is. Um, but a lot of the stuff that that video touched on, we've actually, or I've seen in other videos. But I think it's interesting, and like I said, I don't think all of it is British specific. I think a lot of it can kind of be applied all over. But it is interesting, and it is interest. It is. I like to see somebody kind of calling attention to the things that, as we progress forward, hopefully progress, um, that are kind of getting left by the wayside and not as common anymore. But yeah, I thought that was a really good video for what it was. I'm sure you guys will let me know in the comments the things that you guys disagreed with, or possibly the things that you miss. Um, I always enjoy when you do. So, anyways, thank you guys for watching. Please like, please subscribe, and above all, I hope you guys have a great day. Be kind.